Good afternoon, everyone. We're just going to wait a few minutes. It's a few minutes before this talk is supposed to start, so we're getting a good response, so that's good. Okay, I think we'll start. There seems to be a good amount of people that have joined in, so we need to let everyone know that they can type their questions in the group chat during the talk, and Todd will get back to their question at the end of his talk. Give you just a bit of a bio on Todd. Todd was born in Calgary, Alberta, and now lives in Victoria. He graduated with honors from the Ontario College of Art and Design in 1991 and received a Master's of Fine Art from the University of Victoria in 2008. He has exhibited extensively in Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary, and Vancouver, with recent exhibitions at the Ellsworth Crystal Gallery in Vancouver. His work is in the collections at the Alberta Foundation, the law firms of Addington and Bennett Jones, as well as Nordstrom and Shell Canada. Todd is currently a sessional instructor in the Visual Arts Department at the University of Victoria. Todd is our second guest in our artist talk in the series, and the Dimensions, and this is he's part of the Dimensions of Color exhibition at the gallery right now, which also includes Doug Fraser and Barbara Edwards, which runs until July 15th. Todd works out of his studio in Chinatown and will explain more in his talk. I'd like to introduce Todd.
Hello. Let me just get settled here. Got some notes on my lap. Hopefully that's not too much of a distraction for you all. I would first like to respectfully acknowledge that this talk is being presented to you on the unceded territories of the Lekwungen and Coast Salish peoples, including the Songhees and the Esquimalt First Nations. I'd very much like to thank Cal, Anahita, and Jeff at Winchester Galleries for putting the exhibition Dimensions of Color together, as Cal mentioned, along with Barbara Edwards and Doug Fraser. The exhibition is on, obviously, right now and runs until July 15th. What I'm going to do is jump into a PowerPoint presentation for the bulk of the talk, and then take you on a tour of the gallery and the work so you can see the scale, and I'll talk a little bit more about specific paintings and maybe give you a few detailed shots of paintings and talk about some painterly passages in the work there. So let me just quickly jump into the screen sharing mode, and I will bring you up PowerPoint and into full screen here somehow. There we go. Okay. So the first number of images are installation shots of the exhibition. Some of the photographs were taken by myself. Some of them were taken by people here at the Winchester Gallery. It gives you a sense of the layout of Winchester's space here in Oak Bay, British Columbia, as well as the relationships of scale of works to one another. So I'll take you for a little bit of a tour here. These large paintings here are part of a really nice section of the gallery that allows these large works to really inhabit the space. You can see one of the pieces behind me in the back here. There they are there. These paintings were made in 2017. And here's some more recent work. The painting on the left is from 2018. The painting on the right is the most recent painting in the exhibition that was finished about 3 weeks ago or a month ago. And the sculpture in in this image is by an artist named Wayne Yang. So what I'm going to do now is jump into some images of source material for my paintings, as well as studio shots of individual paintings that give you a kind of a sense of where they're made and just the individual attributes of each painting. So the next image might come as a bit of a shock, but I think it's an important place to start for me. This is a collage of Ellsworth, a painting of Ellsworth Kelly and a photograph of Lemmy Kilmister from Motorhead. Ellsworth Kelly and Lemmy Kilmister died one day apart in 2015. And this collage was made in a response to a derogatory comment that was made online by someone who was complaining about the amount of attention Kelly and Kilmister were receiving on social media. In a fit of passion and defense of these people that I admired, I quickly put together this collage in preview, and it really was a groundbreaking moment in my introduction to digital media as a way to further my painting practice. So cutting and pasting, this was really quick, off the cuff, made as a commemorative gesture. It represents a period of time in my studio practice where I moved away from observational paintings made in oil. They were leading up to the digital component, paintings of the backside of canvases and paintings wrapped in brown paper. So I was moving away from representational imagery in my paintings at this time, and the digital technology really offered an opportunity to open up my painting practice beyond working in the studio. So working on a tablet from home allowed me to expand my painting practice and actually get into a position of unknown, which I think is really important for artists, to always try to work towards new things, new endeavors. And oftentimes I find that technique gets kind of mixed up with ideas of visual art. So this idea of not knowing how to do something really helped to activate momentum for me to move forward. I'm going to move on to some other source material here. These are source material that were used to generate the paintings from 2017, the large paintings behind me that you see here. And they stem from that realization of being able to cut and paste unrelated images and source material in the digital realm. I have to state that, these corresponded directly to the election of Donald Trump in 2016, which I felt really disappointed with, obviously, and as a result of that, I decided that I had a choice as a visual artist, either to make paintings that were overtly political and in some senses maybe fueled negativity, or make paintings that were more about the pursuit of utopia as an antidote to the difficult times that presented themselves with his election. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you see what I refer to as a hardcore punk gig flyer from around the 1980s. These were made to advertise bands that were coming into various cities. They were made by local young people using markers and analog collage. They would cut images out, take them to Kinko's, and distribute them around cities. So that point in history in the 1980s was dealing with Reaganism, right, and the neoconservative aspects of America at that time. And, punk rock at that time was very political. And so I couldn't help but think about that in relationship to Donald Trump's election. So it was a place for me to go as memory, for sure. I very much like the idea of the folds and creases in these old flyers that were uploaded to the internet by collectors. You can see in this image on the left, there's a big chunk taken out of the top corner. There's stains on this thing. So I really like what was happening around the edges of these flyers. And to comment on the image on the right-hand side, the comic books from the 70s are a distinct memory I have that I have carried with me my whole life. They represent a level of excitement and vitality of a young boy encountering a comic book stand in 7-Eleven for the first time. And that memory of color, I think, goes beyond ideas of nostalgia. I think perhaps each of us can recall memories that we have of, our first encounter with color and what that does to shape our world. So that was a place for me to go. These bold primary colors, secondary colors, these graphic forms, in conjunction with what's happening in the flyers on the right, became paintings like you see here. The paintings here represent work that was made in 2016, 2017. They're taken in my studio. And you can see the kind of grid-like structure or window-like structure of these flyers where the central information has been cut out and I'm left with these windows. And I really like these attributes of a way of constructing a grid to hold the painting up and hold the painting together and have them kind of cohabitating with these bold colors that, again, are lifted from comic books of my youth. The small painting on the floor is called Slip. It's a painting from 2016. It's currently in the exhibition here at Winchester and is the oldest painting represented in the current exhibition here. This body of work comes from a series called Working Space that was completed in 2016 and exhibited in Vancouver at Chernoff Fine Art in 2017. My paintings are acrylic on canvas, and they are projected from their digital source onto the screen and then painted from there. And I'll talk a little bit about the digital aspects of my work in relationship to painting. This painting here is also currently in the exhibition. It's a painting that's roughly 5 by 6 feet. And that offers a good example of what I referred to earlier of the attributes of the edges of these flyers that have been kind of articulated into a new presentation. So we have this slice down the middle with an illusionary shadow, a curl of paper that lifts up, dissected aspects of font that have become just directional loops that lead the eye around the canvas. To the left-hand side of the painting, in a lot of these studio shots, you'll see this stick with a ball on the end of it. That stick is called a Maul Stick, and I use that quite a bit in my studio practice. It's a jury-rigged, roughly 2.5 foot long bamboo pole with a ball of tape wrapped around it. And what it does is it allows a painter greater control with their mark. You can position it in your unorthodox hand and brace your painting hand on top of it to get much tighter edge. So I use that quite a bit in my work. I'm going to move forward with more work that's currently in the space here. So these paintings are my initial foray into, as I said earlier, the digital techniques and their relationship to painting. I investigate the abstract relationships between space and color. My paintings express my interest in perceptions of pictorial space and are a direct response to the proliferation of digital imagery and imaging technology. So this idea of copying and pasting became a move that I was quite fascinated with. And it has a lot to do, in my mind, with this idea of cloning, right? So the digital realm is fast in comparison to painting, which is quite slow. And the collages can come off relatively quickly, but the painting aspect of these things can take up to 2 weeks. And I like that dichotomy, right, of bringing these digital things into the world. It's very important to me that these digital collages be made into paintings in order for them to become alive. When they exist on the screen in the digital format, they don't have a life. They are very much like a clone, right? They have no blood running through them. Not that a painting has any blood running through them, but that's the hope as a painter, is to create something so vital that it could potentially transform itself into a living body. And in terms of my painting practice, there's a strong desire not to just escape the world, but to perhaps create a better world for myself when I'm making them, and for the viewer to be afforded the opportunity to escape as well from the difficult world that is increasing, right? I'd like to deliver a quote from the artist Susan Rothenberg, an American painter who passed away recently. Quoting Susan, she states, "The paintings are like prayers relating to wishing for something beyond everyday life." And I think that's a very telling comment to make about what makes a painter keep painting, right? This desire to create something that is different from the world we live in. This painting is called Golden Voice. It's again 72 by 58 inches. I received a BC Arts Council grant in 2017 to produce this large body of work. There are 4 or 5 paintings in that series, 3 of which are presented in the exhibition today. This is another one. And again, the colors are still being pulled from comic books. I'm particularly interested in, at this stage in my practice, the contrast between flatly applied color and the juxtaposition of illusionary elements. So you'll see in the yellow and blue areas of this painting, there are shifts in value, puckers that create this sensation of some form. And I was very much interested in pulling away from representation, but still eliciting the potential of volume and form and something that is tactile in conjunction to the hard edge nature of the graphic paintings. I work in series, and I try to maintain momentum in the studio as best I can. I have this great fear that if I quit painting, it's all going to go away. So I treat it like a job. I go in and I work and I struggle through things until something clicks, and then I ride that train as long as it keeps going, right? So after that large body of work, I shifted scale to 30 by 40 inches. This painting is called Captain Fate. It is also in the exhibition, and it is still playing with similar ideas of the larger format, But scale is very important, right? The moves made in a 5x6 foot painting are not going to solve a smaller painting, right? So shifting in scale helps me to revisit attributes of previous paintings and push them that much farther. So this is an example, a studio shot of that series. I think there's roughly 7 or 8 30 by 40 inch paintings that, again, play with this idea of duplication, which I'm particularly interested in, and ideas of repetition. There are a great number of artists throughout history who've played with these ideas. One in particular, who I'm a great fan of, is a French painter named Bernard Pifaretti, who starts his paintings with a vertical stripe down the middle of the painting, creates information on either the left or right side, and then translates that same information onto the opposing side. So I'm curious about this idea of duplication as it questions the idea of proficiency and validity in painting. You know, oftentimes we think of a painter as being somebody who's somewhat of a magician who can trick the eye and has all this technical skill. But what if it's just about repetition? What if it's just about making and making and making? Having said that, you know, composition is still very much important in these paintings, how the eye moves around the surface of the picture plane. Now what I'm going to do is move a bit forward in time to work that was made in 2017. At this stage in my painting practice, I decided that the illusionary attributes of these folds and tears had run its course, and it was time to kind of look or dig deeper into what was already happening there with the bold, flat colors. So what I'm going to do now is take you to these historical images that are images that are pretty much part of our collective consciousness in terms of ideas of visual perception. On the left, we see an image of what is referred to as Rubens vase, sometimes known as Ruben face or the figure ground vase. It's a famous set of ambiguous or bistable two-dimensional forms developed around 1915 by the Danish psychologist Edgar Ruben. And, you know, we've been introduced to this image from childhood, this kind of a double image that keeps flipping back and forth between the black vase to being flanked by these silhouettes. So that is something that has really intrigued me and something that I've latched on to in terms of color and form and what I can do as a painter to create an unstable painting that is never really at rest spatially, but transitory, right? That keeps flipping. Another bistable or ambiguous image on the right-hand side is known as the duck rabbit. Its earliest known version is attributed to a drawing from 1892. And depending again on how you look at it, in one instance, it's a rabbit, and the next instance, it's a duck. So it's constantly flipping back and forth. So again, I'm still very much interested in the painter Ellsworth Kelly. This painting here is called Rebound. He made this in 1959. And I'm going to include another quotation from Ellsworth Kelly here in regards to his comments on this painting. The painting offers the paradoxical sensation of seeing something in an utterly characteristic aspect without being able to say what you see, yet that the sensation of seeing something essential stands, right? So that took me to this new body of work, again, made in 2017. This painting is called Time Machine. It's also currently in the exhibition. And it speaks to my desire to make paintings that are about the essence of sight and visual perception, right? This creating a An acquaintance of mine came for a studio visit a year or two ago and remarked that she felt that my paintings were suited for the visually impaired. And I like that very much. I like how the paintings exert themselves with these elements of visual perception. Also, at this time, I'm still very much interested in this pursuit of utopia, of a better place, an imagined place. So we have, in this series, you'll find elements of botanical imagery juxtaposed within the architectural grid. And again, as I said, the colors and forms take precedence, and the illusionary attributes from the previous work have been all used up, and I'm digging into the color. Right. There's another one from the exhibition. Get a sense here, I think, in this painting of that paradoxical sensation of figure-ground relationships. What's in front of what and what's beside what, I find always an intriguing attribute. Another painting. This is from a series called Night Moves, as were the other two paintings. They were exhibited in 2019 in Victoria, BC at Deluge Contemporary Art. And I'll show you a few installation shots of those. This series was made up of about a dozen paintings, ranging in size from roughly 22 inches, 18 by 22, up to 6 feet by 4 feet. And I often work in trios in terms of scale. I find that working in a trio allows me to work out ideas, create continuity in an installation of the work as well. And also I find that, if a person is given 3 things as opposed to 2 things, there's a greater opportunity to cycle through the image or the images rather than comparing and contrasting them back and forth. So there's a greater potential for looping around the paintings when we see them. This is the last painting in the exhibition. It's called New Painting Now. And as I said earlier, it was made completed roughly 3 weeks or a month ago. It's part of a new series that was started in the height of COVID, amid the fears and violence that we've seen in America. It's been, ironically, a very productive period of time for me in the studio. I feel very privileged to be able to go to my studio and work. I know that there's not a lot of that available to people, particularly those who live elsewhere, those who have children. Everything's been turned upside down. I don't have children. And I've been fortunate enough that in terms of social distancing, I've been able to go to my studio. There's nobody there. I see more people in the world walking my dog than I do at the studio. So I didn't feel anything wrong with doing that. This idea of new painting now was really important to me. I was really struck by what was happening in America with the racial tensions. And I wanted to make a painting and still want to make paintings that are a rallying cry for change. It's a difficult place to be. I'm a privileged, white, cisgendered male of 50 years old. As I said, I have no children. So how can I say something? What can I say and feel comfortable saying it? I think art history has great examples of wonderful things being made in difficult times. If you think of the artists from the Second World War, Guernica came to mind today with the Spanish Civil War. The painters in Northern Europe, predominantly, I think there was some Spaniards as well, and Italians, part of the collective group known as Art Informal. They started to really present paintings that were a direct relationship to the human body. So instead of making pictures of things, they brought the discussion back to the damaged body that was prevalent in the Second World War. I'm going to take you now into the studio again, and there's a couple of images here that will round out the PowerPoint portion of this talk prior to me getting up and wandering around at individual paintings. I've asked myself in terms of finalizing this talk, what keeps me motivated to make paintings? It's a constant pursuit and inquiry into the pursuit of making something new that elicits a sense of familiarity to me, yet at the same time is arrived at through surprise and accident. I hope to achieve, this is another example of work from the new Painting Now series. The two bottom paintings are 5 by 6 feet. The top two paintings are 3 by 4 feet. And I hope to achieve a similar rush of vitality from my work that I did as that boy experiencing that comic book stand for the first time in 7-Eleven in 1972. Right? And as the artist Ed Ruscha says, I'm making my report. Okay. So what we're going to do now is, if I could get Anahita to, or Jeff, whomever is up for it, join me in moving around the space. There we go. Okay. Maybe what we'll do, Anahita, is just kind of start with that painting and then we'll move around, if that's okay. So you'll get a better sense of the scale of the work, certainly in relationship to the standing figure. I'm roughly 6 feet tall. So the scale of the work, particularly at this size, really transforms the environment that they're in and allows the viewer the sensation of being able to step into the work, which is very different from smaller works that maybe have an association to this idea of a window as opposed to a doorway or a space. You can see here, if you come up closer, Anahita, I'm going to talk a little bit about these little moves here. You see these little moves here, and this little move up here is again something that is repeated and duplicated. There's a sensation here of the shifts in values that I referred to earlier. These little glitches here, there's a number of thin lines that you'll see in my painting, and they come from the digital source where the digital kind of dragging and dropping doesn't line up properly. So you're left with these elements. There's a couple of paintings over there that I'll talk to you more about that are kind of failures in the collage, but I choose to include them in the painting almost in a way to, it's a paradox, right? I'm painting and spending a majority of time painting these accidents, which prior to digital collage, I would have painted out, right? I would have taken that paint edge and just taken it off the edge of the canvas, right? So that's something that's stuck with the work, this kind of reappropriation of accidents. I should state that I use a lot of tape. It's called frog tape. It's has a really nice adhesive cap to it that allows the paint to keep from bleeding. I also use, now the tape is only used in the horizontal and vertical elements. I use large house painting brushes about the size of my hand, down to little craft brushes. So you'll see here this little nodule here. You see elements down here at the bottom as well. So those represent dissected text that have been left over from cutting out those initial flyers that I talked about before. So maybe what we can do is we'll move around here. We're going to have to sip the water. So we'll talk a bit. This is similar to the previous paintings. Again, this would have been masking tape that had been left on these flyers and photocopies. Right here again, we have this wonderful illusionary attribute of that shadow that creates the sensation of the surface of the painting being pulled away, and also a nod back to the poster itself. We'll move over here to this smaller painting called Slip. And it's a good example of what happens when scale changes. So we've moved from 6 by 5 feet down to 2 feet by 3 feet. So I don't usually work in such a narrow composition, but I chose to do so on this to create another challenge for myself in terms of solving the painting. This painting, again, is made up of copying and pasting. So you get a sense of this internal square that has been minimized from a larger element elsewhere. So this idea of duplication is apparent in the work. And this wonderful vertical red line here has the dual effect of existing as a red line on an orangey red surface, but also the potential to act as a shadow to this other rectangle that is potentially laying on top. So I find that worked really well in this painting. And again, these little glitches that have been left over from that initial collage where things don't completely match up is something that I like to play with. But it gives the viewer an opportunity to move in and out with the work. So again, this example up in here, the fine handling of information in there drags the viewer into that space where the broader and bolder areas of color push the viewer back, right? So there's this wonderful pushing and pulling that's happening in that painting. Repetition, again, with these undulating, curvilinear, organic blue edges that move the painting around and create a sense of breathing in contrast to that hard grid that we see there. We can talk about this painting here. This painting is called Home Room Thriller, and it is an example of work made after the flyer appropriated paintings, where again I decided to strictly deal with shifts in value and form and start to play with these ideas of visual perception. Again, scale, we tend to look at this painting more as a window potentially than a doorway or something that we can walk into. So that works nicely there. Maybe we can go to just this painting over here, and it too is from the series in 2017. It's called Whiteout. It's an example again of the relationship of the grid and the organic forms cohabitating. This is a really nice example of the glitches. And if you work your way up the edge of this painting, you see areas that are not aligned, right? So again, if this was a painting made just in front of itself, conventionally that yellow would be taken off the edge, right? These wonderful little seams that create tension. It's almost like an elastic snapping, right, that pushes you back out into the painting. So where I left off with the illusionary attributes of the float hold and masking tape illusions from the flyers, I started to realize that value shifts in values can take that place of illusionary painting and present ideas of volume, right? You can look at this painting simultaneously as being a lighter yellow over top of a darker yellow, flat paint on top of the canvas, or all of a sudden, this yellow form starts to have an illusion of volume. I often tell students that you only need 3 values to create that sense of illusion with light, medium, and dark, and then all of a sudden you have this volumetric form. So that's something that I'm really intrigued by as well. Maybe to round out right now, I'll finish off with the latest painting. Again, the new painting now. This too has brought forward these ideas of these wonderful little glitches that are left over from the constant laying and unlaying of collaged elements on top of one another. This is, I think, a quite successful bistable painting in terms of its movement. We can look at this black space as being a distant space that you could potentially put your hand underneath that, this green space, or it has an essence of a figure, an arm here, and then a greater elbow here. So it's constantly moving, that painting. We have this white and gray grid, this large checkerboard chunk down in the bottom right-hand corner that again pushes the viewer into new territory. And it was very much this sensation of making something new. I arrived at the conclusion of the collage with a surprise, and that surprise is something that I really try to work towards with all the work that I make. So I have folders and folders of collages that I make incessantly, and more often than not, there's only one that works, right? And I'm looking for that surprise. If that surprise doesn't happen, it's not the right thing. So I have to dig in and start to break it all up again. So scale, again, this is another nice large vertical painting that allows the viewer potentially to walk into the space. Interpret the painting in that way. Okay, so I think that's it for now in terms of moving around the space. How are we for time? Does anybody have a...
Can have questions now?
Sure, yeah.
About 15 minutes before the hour.
Okay. So I went like 45 minutes, did I?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that was a bit long, but hopefully informative. So I'll happily field some questions in the chat here. So I see that there's 4 questions so far. Okay. If anyone has any questions, feel free to write a comment or pose a question. I have a lot of nice, wonderful comments about enjoying the work, and that's great. I really appreciate that. But if there's anybody out there who has anything to say, that would be great. Okay, here's a question. The individual is asking me if I'm painting on sawhorses or against the wall or on an easel. Okay, good question. So you're probably referring to one of the studio images that I showed you. The sawhorses are there to afford me the opportunity to gesso the paintings flat, to lay the paintings flat on the sawhorses and apply the gesso in that regard. Then I take the painting once it's gessoed and I hang it on the wall, and it's all worked on vertically on the wall. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Thanks, Angus. Thanks for coming. Okay, here we go. The question regarding copying and pasting. The source material, again, the recent source material comes from looking around my interior space at home, doing quick kind of blind gesture drawings on my trackpad. I also would have a slew of comic books beside me as color reference. And also just kind of relying on my intuition as an artist to be a conduit. I think that's a really great place of an artist in the world, to be a conduit for everything that's going around them. And I tend to react. I had a good discussion about making art during COVID with a friend of mine. And, amongst all my colleagues, is this question of how do you work? What do you make? And for me, it was really important to just react and to make something, to get that emotion out into the world. A question here about reusing collage elements. I do, actually. As I said earlier, I have a selection of file folders on my laptop that are collected from the past 5 years of source material for paintings that were successful. I can go back into those, pull those out, and reuse them in other works. But I want to make it. I don't want to make that entirely apparent. I want to make it such that it solves a problem in the new painting beyond just remaking something. Okay. There's another question. Sorry, where do you see, okay, this is an interesting question. Where do you see the future of your art in Canadian global context? Wow, that's a big question. The future, as we all know, is totally up in the air. Everybody, we don't know what we're doing from one week to the next, certainly with the pandemic and isolation and the ability for galleries to reopen internationally and have that viewer relationship again. Very important for me that I feel that I'm adding to particularly ideas of Canadian art. I've spent a lot of time traveling around Canada, living around Canada, Toronto, Montreal, Edmonton, Calgary, Vancouver, went to school in Toronto. Very much informed, particularly by Painters 11, which were a group of painters out of Toronto. William Ronald, in particular, is a painter that I hold in high regard. And, this is such a great opportunity for me to be able to bring my work to you and my ideas to you. It's a thrill to be included. In the same room, there's some Harold Klunders over there, and that just blows my mind. Harold Klunder is somebody that I've been a fan of since I was 20 years old. So, it's quite a privilege for me, and I really hope to be able to add to the Canadian and global context of painting, for sure. But more importantly, to keep challenging myself. Let's see. Oh boy, there's a couple more here. Okay. I'm going to read this question aloud. Noticing the progression of your paintings, it seems you are moving towards more organic forms and softer colors juxtaposed with hard lines and bright colors. Do you think this is somehow a reaction to the global situation? Absolutely. Again, that pursuit of utopia, the pursuit of a better place, the pursuit of pleasure, is terribly important for me. And I think for hopefully all of us, it's heartbreaking to turn on the news at any second. There's so much anger in the world, so much confusion. I think we all need an opportunity for pleasure, and I hope that the paintings elicit that. But beyond just this idea of making a nice painting, I really want to make a painting that is intellectual and keeps the viewer on their toes. So that's really important. Some really nice congratulatory remarks. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll make sure I'm not forgetting anybody. Anahita, I just have a question about the chat. I'm going to make sure. Oh, here we go. There's some more questions here. What is the role of titling of your works? Okay. Titling of works is a tough one. Oftentimes, a successful title in my mind comes immediately. It comes at the same instance of saying that they come when the digital collage is solved. They hit me. They may be totally unrelated, but there's something that clicks. Sometimes they're pulled directly from the comic book covers themselves. Some of them are directly related to that. They're becoming more, as I refer to the new painting now, that title is rooted in a battle cry, So perhaps the titles will become more like that, as a call to arms for artists and people to make a difference. So I hope that answers your question there. Okay. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anybody. I think we're good. Oh, wait. Okay, there we go. If I missed anybody in the chat, I'm sorry about that. Thank you very much for joining me today and taking time out of your day. It's been a pleasure to share my work with you. And thanks again to Cal, Jeff, and Anahita here at Winchester. And have a good rest of your day. And if you live in Victoria or you're on the West Coast and can safely travel and feel comfortable about going out in the world, please come by the exhibition. Again, there's nothing like seeing painting in the real to really get the full experience. You can also have the privilege of seeing the other painters in the exhibition. And it's a wonderful group exhibition that talks about ideas of color, with each artist bringing their own points to that idea. So thanks again. And that's it. Okay. I'm going to walk off screen now.
All right. Thank you very much, Todd, for your very informative talk. I think everybody's enjoying that, and it's very informative. Anyway, thanks everybody for joining us for the hour. The exhibition runs until July 15th. So please, if you're in Victoria, come down. And if you're in Vancouver, and again, if you can safely visit, please come by. Thanks, everyone.